Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Bibliometrics and Research Assessment Symposium. My name is Chris Belter, and I'll be acting as the Master of Ceremonies for this particular event. We have a really great program in store for you, and I'm really excited to get started. I do have one quick note that I wanted to mention right at the off. On behalf of everyone on the planning committee and organizing committee and events committee, I just want to say thank you to all of you who are attending the symposium. Thank you to everyone who have submitted proposals and who have agreed to be speakers for our event. We are really overwhelmed by the response that we've gotten from the community. It's really heartening and really rewarding to see so much positive feedback and so much support from the community. We have over 900 people registered for the symposium, coming from over 40 countries from around the world. And we are really glad and really heartened to be able to bring this event to you. So thank you all very much. I'm now going to turn it over to Keith Cogdill, the director of the NIH Library, for a few words of welcome. So Keith, are you there?
Yeah, Chris, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Super, thank you. Well, it's really a pleasure to welcome you to the NIH Library's fourth Bibliometric Symposium. We want to extend an especially warm welcome to our partners, especially the Maryland chapter of the Special Libraries Association, and of course all the attendees. I think the last time we held this symposium back in 2018, we had participants from 7 countries. As Chris just mentioned, I think we're now at 45 or 46 different countries represented in the symposium, from the US, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Brazil, UK, Ireland, France, Italy. I'm having fun with this, by the way. Spain, Finland, Netherlands, Sweden, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Lebanon, Turkey, the Czech Republic, Croatia, Lithuania, Poland, Isabel from Portugal. Hi, Isabel. Russia, China, Japan, Malaysia, Taiwan, India, Australia, New Zealand, Tonga, and South Africa. So really an impressive representation. It's, as Chris said, it's quite heartening and inspiring to see that. So this, as I mentioned, this is our 4th Bibliometric Symposium, but it's the first one that we're doing entirely in a virtual format entirely. We have, as Chris mentioned, we've had over 900 registrations, and that's nearly a 4-fold increase from our previous symposium in 2018. With events like this, the NIH Library is dedicated to fostering conversations among librarians and the communities they serve to explore and expand new service areas like bibliometrics. This would not be possible without the partnership, again, of the Maryland chapter of the SLA. So we're very grateful to them for helping make this possible. At the NIH Library, our bibliometric service is now in its 6th year, going back to 2014 when we welcomed Chris Belter and Dr. Yaling Liu to the NIH Library. Chris and Yaling have been quite productive in their time with us. We keep track of their bibliometric assessments and evaluations and their projects, and I believe they passed the 1,000 project mark in April of this year. So congratulations and kudos to Chris and Yaling. So again, I especially want to thank Chris and Yaling for not just their outstanding service to NIH, but also for their commitment to sharing their knowledge and the resources of the NIH Library Bibliometrics Service with other librarians through channels such as our symposium. So I'll wrap it up now, and I just want to close with thanks to the many people who helped make this symposium possible, especially Chris and Yaling, and I want to wish everyone all the best for the symposium. So back to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Keith. That was great. So as Keith mentioned, I am one of the co-hosts along with my colleague, Dr. Yaling Liu. Yaling, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are not able to see each other this time, but please know that you have my entire attention. All right. Thank you. So I'm going to give the mic to Liz, our keynote speaker.
Actually, I've got a few announcements.
Okay, great.
Sorry, Lizzie. Sorry, Lizzie. Got a few things to talk about first. So just a couple of quick housekeeping announcements before we start the program. We are recording this session, and we plan to record all of the sessions in the future, but we are not recording the attendees, nor are we attending the chat box, so none of the attendees will be part of any of our recordings. Audio is in broadcast only, so you don't have to join the audio session to participate, and all attendees are automatically muted and will not be able to unmute. If you have any questions, either for us, for technical questions, or questions for our speakers, please use the chat box to get in touch with me. There's quite a lot of activity already happening there, so please do use the chat box to get in touch, ask questions, and so forth. Finally, live captions are available in the multimedia viewer panel. Simply click on the icon to open that, and you should be able to get live captions, or there's also a URL that's being shared in the chat already, so you'll be able to do that. So with that, I am now going to go ahead and kick our session off with Lizzie Gadd. So for those of you who are on the List Bibliometrics forum and the Bibliomagician blog, you already know Lizzie, but for those of you who may not, Elizabeth Lizzie Gadd is the Research Policy Manager for Publications at Loughborough University. She chairs the International Network of Research Management Societies, or INORMS, Research Evaluation Working Group, and was the recipient of the 2020 INORMS Excellence in Research Management Leadership Award. She's the founding chair of the List Bibliometrics Forum and the Bibliometrics blog, and the Bibliomagician blog, excuse me, and also co-champions the Association of Research Managers and Administrators Research Evaluation Special Interest Group. So Lizzie, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine, and your slides look great, so take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris, and a very good morning to you all, although it's evening here in the UK. And thank you so much for inviting me to share a few thoughts with you today. I'm really excited because originally I had to turn down Yarling's invitation as I wouldn't have been able to travel, but the silver lining of the pandemic cloud is that I can now participate remotely, so that's brilliant for me. If we were meeting in person today, I would now be asking everybody to give a huge round of applause to Yarling and Chris for their fantastic work in pulling this online event together. It's such a big job organising a conference, but to do so online for 3 days and to offer it up to us all for free is a huge service to this community. So huge thanks to you, Chris and Yarling. Amazing work. And I know from the chat I was seeing earlier, there's lots of hurrahs for Chris and Yarling in there as well. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my journey, partly because it's relevant to what I want to say today, but also because I think it's helpful to know where people are coming from. So I work as a research policy manager at Loughborough University, which is hard for a lot of the world to say, in the area of publications. But before this, I worked in the library as an academic services manager, and it was in this role that I found myself being asked more and more questions about journal citation reports and how someone could find their H-index, and I realised I didn't know, so I found out. But I also set up a forum called List Bibliometrics, so I could legitimately pick the brains of others to help support my colleagues. 10 years later, this group now has an annual conference, a blog, the Bibliomagician, and a committee with various areas of responsibility. When I moved to the research office 5 years ago to take up my current role, I joined the Association of Research Managers and Administrators, and I noticed they had a metric special interest group. And when I got in touch with the owner to discuss synergies with that group and List Bibliometrics, he promptly said, "Oh, great, we're looking for a new leader. How about it?" So I ended up managing 2 groups. And then when ARMA took their turn to chair the International Network of Research Management Societies, INORMS, they set up 2 working groups, and I was asked to chair one on research evaluation, and I'll talk a bit about the work of this group today. I'm not telling you this because I'm self-absorbed. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that I'm one of you. I'm amongst my people today, which is brilliant. I'm just a practitioner who made some opportunities and took some opportunities, and I want to make this talk as practical as I can for this practitioner community and to share some hints and tips. So obviously my title is a parody of Stephen Covey's blockbusting book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but you'll be pleased to hear that I've narrowed my list down to 5. So I'm going to present what I believe to be the 5 habits of highly effective bibliometric practitioners. And I'd like to thank the people of Twitter who contributed their suggestions to this list. So here goes. So having heard my journey, you won't be surprised to hear that my first habit of highly effective practitioners is that they keep learning. And there are 2 reasons I think we need to keep learning. The first of which is that there is actually no obvious career path for people like us. And if we were all together in one room, I'd get you to turn to the person next to you and ask how they ended up doing what they're doing. And I think we'd have quite a wide variety of answers. The crux of the matter being that most of us weren't explicitly trained for this. So Bibliometrics did a survey a couple of years ago to support some work we were doing around bibliometric competencies, and it found that only 29% of librarians who were supporting their institutions with bibliometrics had actually covered bibliometrics in their LIS qualification. Now, I think this is changing, and iSchools are starting to cover this area, but that still leaves a lot of us in the field for whom it's too late. We're relying on CPD and self-help to get up to speed. And once you've achieved a certain level of skill, your next promotion is probably not going to be a more specialist, in-depth bibliometrics role, but a more generic management role, perhaps in scholarly communications, perhaps even managing incoming bibliometric or evaluation specialists, but rarely a role for which bibliometrics is a critical pathway. And of course, for many of us, research evaluation is just one role of many in our current portfolio. This is why the Bibliometrics group pulled together this series of bibliometric competencies back in 2017. These are now being updated by 2 of our committee members. However, they provide a good self-assessment tool to check any gaps in your learning and to set yourself learning targets for development. So I really recommend you take a look at these. And one of the key deficiencies for those coming at this work from an arts or humanities background is often a lack of statistical numeracy. So we developed a course called Statistics for Responsible Metrics, which is now being run by the UK ARMA, but the original slides for this course are freely available on the Bibliomagician blog. So do take a look at those if that's you. And I also know that the NIH runs some great courses, as do the CWTS. But it's not just a lack of a formal career route into this role that means we need to keep learning. It's because the field changes so rapidly. And here is a good old Google Ngram showing the growth in the bibliometric and scientometric literature. And I always feel a bit guilty as a bibliometric practitioner using Google Ngram because it's a bit problematic, really. But it's interesting to see the relative terms. And you can see a huge uplift in bibliometric-related content from 2010. And of course, when I started out in 2010, we really only had 2 main data sources, Web of Science and Scopus. Now we have many more, as listed here. We also have a whole host of citation, visualization, and evaluation tools available to us that we didn't have 10 years ago, including some that are built on artificial intelligence, which bring with them a whole new set of technical and ethical challenges for the practitioner. We also have more indicators available to us than ever. So some work by Lorna Wildgaard analysed 108 individual author metrics back in 2014. And you can see that the introduction of the dreaded H-index in 2005 seemed to start a chain reaction, leading to many more author indicators, and who knows how many there are now. And if we didn't have enough, we can even create our own indicators with new tools such as SciMeter here, based on archive data, some of which are a bit dubious, I have to say, e.g. adding together the journal impact factors of the journal someone's published in. Don't try this at home. And we can see a similar picture with journal metrics. So I copied these out of a handbook for Bibliometrics. Don't ask me what half of them are, but I'm showing you these because there's a lot to keep up to date with, which means that the only sensible position for the bibliometric practitioner is one of humility, as we admit that we can't know everything, and curiosity, as we seek to find out as much as we can. I like this quote, which may, like many attributed to Albert Einstein, may or may not have been spoken by him, but it resonates with me. And I'm guessing with many who find themselves in bibliometrics roles with no particular training, no special talent, and only their curiosity to keep them going. Well, I guess I'm here to say it's enough, you know, your curiosity and your passion is enough. I'm only really sitting here because I found myself being asked questions about this stuff that I didn't know the answer to. So I started this Bibliometrics in order to find out. So where might you go to do all this learning? Well, I've provided here a few examples of courses, blogs and guides that are really great starting points. I'm not going to read them out, you can do that. But I do want to highlight the 5 Allen Insights Responsible Guides written by members of the LISP Bibliometrics community, and give a shout out to the poster session that Robin Price is delivering on these later on. So number 1 is keep learning. I think the second habit of the highly effective bibliometric practitioner is that they are value-led and not data-led. So the title of this event is Bibliometrics and Research Assessment. However, it's important for us to remember that bibliometrics does not equal research assessment, that bibliometrics is a subset of research assessment. And that's despite sometimes our citation benchmarking tools, such as this one here, telling us that a bunch of citation and publication indicators amounts to an individual's overall research performance. They do not. Or to put it another way, bibliometrics makes a great servant and a terrible master. We need to keep bibliometrics in its rightful place in our evaluative efforts. So this principle of being value-led is actually the first stage of the scope model that's been developed by the iNorms Research Evaluation Working Group to help practitioners like us to get our evaluations in the right order and, of course, to evaluate our existing evaluations. And I wanted to take a few minutes just to run through this because I use this for all my evaluations now. I find it enormously helpful and I hope that you will too. So in a nutshell, step 1 is to start with what you value about the thing that you're evaluating. Now, that sounds obvious, but all too often we don't start our evaluations here. We either start with what other people value, i.e. university rankings or funders or national assessment regimes, and we try to tick their boxes, or we start with our bibliometric data and see what that can tell us, rather than starting with our research question and working forwards. This phenomenon, as you probably know, is called the streetlight effect, as illustrated by this cartoon. Where did you lose your wallet? In the park. So why are you looking here? Because this is where the streetlight is. Too many evaluations rely on bibliometric data, not because the volume of publications or even their citedness is what they value, but because it is so readily available and so easy to use. We must get the direction of travel right in our evaluations and start with what we value before deciding how we can best assess the entities we're measuring against those values. The next step is to understand the C context in which you're evaluating. So too often we have conversations about research evaluation and particularly about the suitability of certain indicators in the abstract without first articulating the reasons we're evaluating, the why, and the nature of the entity we're evaluating, the who. And of course, these should have a significant impact on our eventual approach. So in terms of why, there are 6 main reasons, I think, for assessment. We can measure to analyze, so science of science type activities that study, say, publication patterns for the sole purpose of understanding them better. We can measure to advocate, so choosing indicators that show an individual or university in its best light for promotional materials or grant applications. We can measure for accountability reasons, so plotting progress against our objectives. We can measure to acclaim, so using indicators to compare one entity with another. So university rankings are an example of that. Measuring to adapt, so this is becoming increasingly common, and that's the use of indicators to incentivize certain behaviours. So in the UK, the measurement of open access content submitted to REF, our Research Excellence Framework, is an example of that. And finally, measure to allocate. So that's any activity that results in some kind of reward for the entity being measured. It could be a job, a promotion, a grant, a prize, whatever it might be. And as you can probably tell as we went through that list, that some of those activities will have a more significant consequence for the entity under assessment than others, and therefore they carry a greater sense of risk. So this matrix plots those various reasons for evaluating, I've just been through, alongside various entities of different sizes across the top there, and attempts to indicate what the associated risks might be. So, for example, plotting the publication volume of one country against that of another for the sole purpose of understanding their relative production levels has very little impact on the countries being assessed, so we've labelled that green. However, any form of assessment at the level of the individual that results in reward or lack of reward, i.e. allocation type activities, has a high impact on those individuals and therefore carries a much greater degree of risk. And I would say that the use of bibliometrics in these various settings maps pretty neatly onto those colour codes. So using bibliometrics to understand university level performance is one thing, using bibliometrics to reward individuals is quite another. So here's a couple of examples of that. So this is a report that uses Scival's field-weighted citation impact metric to analyse the citedness of various countries over time. Now, the field-weighted citation impact is unstable for evaluating fewer than 10,000 documents. But in this context, it's okay because we're looking at countries and they produce loads of outputs. However, in 2017, a UK university got into trouble for proposing the use of the field-weighted citation impact to identify staff for redundancy. This was quickly swooped upon by the Twitter sphere, but the danger of using this metric at the level of individuals for reward, or in this case, redundancy, was hugely problematic. And of course, the other key context consideration is discipline. So an indicator that works for entities in one discipline will not necessarily work for those in another, even if the evaluative purpose is the same. The O of scope stands for options and reminds us that we do actually have them. We don't have to reach for Scival or academic analytics every time. But before we consider our options, there are a couple of checkpoints here. The first is, do I need to evaluate at all? In some contexts, especially the increasing use of measuring to incentivize certain behaviours, it may be that evaluating is not the best way to incentivize behaviour. We might need to enable that behaviour first. So if we think about recycling, we all understood why recycling was important. We all knew where the bottle banks were, but most of us didn't recycle regularly until the local council provided us with a bin in our front garden. And once that was available, we didn't need recycling rankings or a field-weighted recycling index to motivate us. We just did it because it was easy. The second thing that we need to consider at this point is that we should always evaluate with the evaluated, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later. But we need to get into a mode where evaluation is not something we do to people, but we do with people. So when we consider our options with our evaluatees, the important thing to consider here is whether your indicator is a suitable proxy for the thing you are evaluating. So we think a rule of thumb here is that generally speaking, quantitative measures are generally for quantifiable things, things you can count, citations, publications, money, students. And qualitative indicators should be for qualitative things, quality, excellence, value, impact. And we should be especially careful if using quantitative indicators as a proxy for qualitative things. So it's important to remember that citations do not equal quality, and a university's ranking position does not equal excellence, for example. Probe is the step that puts responsible into responsible evaluation. So it provides 4 questions to sense check the sensibleness of your approach. And the first is, who does this discriminate against? And it's amazing to me how little we ask this question, and also how frequently our approaches do unwittingly discriminate against some groups. Knowing your data is really critical in this regard, and particularly the way that bibliometric data can fail to equally represent all groups. So this is a good example of an evaluation that didn't probe very deeply. So Indonesia recently introduced a researcher ranking system that uses the volume of articles and citations from Google Scholar and Scopus for deciding who are the best researchers and for allocating funding to these people. And when you look at the resulting top 10, you can see that the number of women who appear in this list is 1, and the number of researchers in the fields of social sciences, arts and humanities is 0. As bibliometric practitioners, we must never forget that our work is always going to be constrained by the inherent limitations of the bibliometric data we're working with. Sometimes I think we can get bedazzled by the number of records and the data points that we're dealing with, and we get lulled into a false sense that this bibliographic data somehow represents the whole of the scholarly enterprise. In fact, we use the term the scholarly record, but it doesn't record the whole of scholarship. So we must remember that what we're mainly looking at in our citation databases is journal articles. And of course, journal articles that are mainly written by STEM-based scholars, science, technology, engineering, medicine, as this study found last year, where every database that investigated indexed fewer arts and humanities outputs than all other subjects. But then it's not a complete record of even STEM-based scholarship, because much scholarship doesn't even make it into the literature because it doesn't tell an exciting enough story. So this fascinating study looked at the cumulative effect of reporting and citation biases on what eventually ends up in the scholarly record. And they started with all of the clinical trials registered relating to the treatment of depression, and the red dots on bar A on the left-hand side show the proportion of negative trials relative to those that have positive results, the green dots. The next bar shows the proportion of those positive and negative trials that made it into the literature at all. The next bar shows the proportion of those published studies that actually focused on the negative findings. The next shows the proportion of those published studies that put a positive spin on those negative findings. And the final bar shows us which of those studies ultimately got cited by resizing those dots according to citedness. And from this we conclude that there is absolutely no citation glory, the tiny red dots on the right-hand side, to be found in negative trials, no matter how critical they are to scholarship. And of course, the major point here is that most of them never made it into the literature in the first place. We know that fewer women are represented in the literature than men. They tend to get cited less, and they tend to self-cite less. So this study was by Cassidy Sugimoto and colleagues, and Cassidy is giving a keynote at this conference. And it shows the proportion of the world, highlighted in orange, where contributions from women are higher than those from men. And as you can see, there's not a lot of orange on this graph. It's a pitifully low proportion. It's outputs from men that dominate the literature. The literature is also skewed towards the global north, with this data from CWTS showing that the proportion of outputs from the two mighty continents of South America and Africa made up just 7% of the worldwide research publication output in 2011 to 2016, and only 4.5% if you exclude collaborations with the global north. That's 22.5% of the population, represented by only 4.5% of the literature. Let that sink in for a second. And in case you're wondering, I redid the maths for 2017 to 19 and it hasn't changed. It's 7% overall. We talk about decolonizing our libraries and our curricula. Perhaps we need to start talking about decolonizing our bibliographic databases. We can't say that Black Lives Matter, but their scholarship does not. And of course, related to this, as you can see from the Scopus journal selection criteria here, is that the literature is skewed towards outputs in English. I think 80% of Scopus content is in English. And this data highlights a number of countries where the proportion of outputs in the English language significantly outweighs those in their local languages. So to go back to my original point about discrimination, we have to bear in mind that any bibliometric analysis we do will suffer in some way from the limitations I've described here. And at the very least, we need to note these limitations in our reports, but preferably we'll play a part in seeking to eradicate these inequalities, ever mindful that many of them go beyond scholarship to the world in which we live. And colleagues, for me, one of the key questions I think we're all going to be facing in the next 3 to 5 years as research evaluators is how can we compensate in our evaluations for the unequal impacts of COVID-19 on the ability of researchers to do research. And all the groups I've just talked about, women, the Global South, arts and humanities, are likely to be more highly impacted by COVID-19 due to caring responsibilities, poverty, and the nature of their research. So how can we mitigate against this in our evaluations, both in our institutions, but more broadly? I've not really heard anyone talking about this, and to me it's a problem, and one we need to bear in mind when thinking about discrimination in the next few years. The second probe question is, how might this approach be gained? And I know that Mario is giving a keynote tomorrow, and I'm guessing he'll talk about this in some detail given his book on the topic. But we have to remember that where there is a prize, there's a game. People will adjust their behaviours according to the rules of the game. And that's not always a bad thing. You know, as I say, this is increasingly why we measure. We just need to ask whether those adjustments are always helpful or not. So, as an example, there's been a lot written recently about Italy's National Research Evaluation Scheme, which is largely bibliometric-based, leading to hugely inflated self-citation rates and citation cartels. Thirdly, does the cost of measuring outweigh the benefit? As practitioners, we need to be really careful that the value we gain from our evaluations is proportional to the cost of running them. You'll know as well as I do that data is endlessly fascinating. We slice it this way and that way. We go down rabbit holes exploring its various facets. But we need to always ask whether by running that additional analysis, it's actually going to lead us to any different conclusions, different decisions, different messaging to that we've already got. And if so, whether it's worth the effort. Doing research evaluation well is costly and time-consuming, and we know we're living in cash-strapped times, so we need to evaluate judiciously and meaningfully. And finally, we need to ask, what might the unintended consequences of this approach be? And I think this is quite a useful tool in our toolbox here, thinking, okay, I've planned for this evaluation to do this. How might this be used in the wrong way for the right purpose, a stress case? In the wrong way for the wrong purpose, a misuse case, in the right way for the wrong purpose, an abuse case, all of which can be problematic. And then finally, when you've worked through those steps, you can run your evaluation and evaluate your evaluation. And as I say, you can use Scope for both developing new evaluations and for assessing existing ones. And I'd say this is a value-led, context-sensitive, uses appropriate methods and has no adverse consequences, is a success. But to go back to my original point, we need to start with what we value when we run our evaluations and then proceed in an orderly fashion. Because if we don't, there can be significant negative consequences for those that we are ultimately serving. And this leads me neatly onto my third habit of highly effective bibliometric folk, and that is that they give some thought as to who they are actually serving. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there's no two ways about it. We have a significant research culture problem in academia. The recent Wellcome Trust report into research culture highlighted significant issues which often found their roots in research evaluation. Incentives that focus on quantity of outputs, narrow concepts of impact rather than on real quality, an intense pressure to publish, too little value placed on how results are actually achieved, aggressive and harmful levels of competition. And that's before we look at their concerns about job security and, at worst, experiences of exploitation, discrimination, harassment and bullying. As the director of the Wellcome Trust, Jeremy Farah, commented, these results paint a shocking portrait of the research environment and one we must all help change. A poor research culture ultimately leads to poor research. The pressures of working in research must be recognised and acted upon by all. And the reason I've included this in a talk about highly effective bibliometric practitioners is that we are included in that word all. We need to be acutely aware of the research environment that we are a part of and the role of research evaluation within it. Now, this might not be the message you were expecting to hear at a bibliometric symposium, but this is the reality of the world we are working in. So back in 2014, a Professor Stefan Grimm from Imperial College London died by suicide after he was told he was not meeting the expected income generation target of £200,000 per annum. And there is undoubtedly a growing audit culture in higher education, just as there is globally, which is having a negative impact on our academic colleagues who are already facing a higher mental health risk than other professions. All of which should lead us to reflect on who we are actually serving. Now, this might sound like a funny thing to say, and you may well turn around to me and say, Lizzie, I serve the folk who pay my salary. They say jump and I jump. And of course I get that. But, and hear me right here, sometimes we best serve the institutions who pay our salary by not always jumping when they say jump, but by having a strong sense as to what the values, the mission, the goals, the strategies are of our organisation, and by using our professionalism to steer them towards a more authentic way of meeting those goals. In practical terms, if your boss asks you to supply the H indices of all the staff in a particular department to help decide who gets a promotion, this isn't actually going to serve those scholars equally. The promotion might not go to the right person. And if it doesn't serve scholars equally, it's not going to be good for the scholarship being done at your institution. The right people might not find themselves in the right place. And if it isn't good for scholarship, it's ultimately not going to be best for humanity, who are dependent on the right people playing to their strengths to solve the problems that affect us all. So whilst responding to your boss's request might mean you serve your boss, you might actually be failing the scholars, the scholarship, and ultimately humanity that, to my mind, we also serve. Last year, the BBC ran a series on 20th century icons, and a guy called Chris Packham, pictured here, was championing the cause of Alan Turing, the father of the modern computer. And he said this: California is burning. The Arctic is melting. Our species, without any ambiguity, is precipitating its own extinction. Do you honestly think that our current crop of politicians, our explorers, artists, or rock stars are going to save us? No. The scientists are the only hope for the future. Our scientists, and I might expand that to our scholars, are our hope for the future. And we can't afford as a human race to lose them either from academia or in extreme cases from the planet through ill-conceived and poorly thought through metrics. To this end, as far as we're able as practitioners, we need to seek to create a culture that prizes these three things. Firstly, recognition over judgment. If you ask a room full of academics who wants to be judged, you won't see many people put their hand up. Ask who'd like to be recognised, and I'm pretty sure all hands would go up. Because judgment is inherently critical and comparative and seeks out weakness. And recognition is inherently positive and celebratory and seeks out strength. Excuse me. We need to move away from hyper-competition, fueled by comparative evaluation, which is the birthplace of many mental health problems, and move towards an environment where, yes, all players have to meet a certain quality threshold, educational level, ability to teach, research, and write, but beyond that, recognizes that we all have different strengths that are all needed, that should all be celebrated, inspiring undergraduates, public engagement, entrepreneurship. And of course, when we have a wider range of things to recognize, we need to recognize them all equally and not pay lip service to holistic evaluation and secretly only value pounds and publications. The second thing we need to prize is potential over past performance. Research evaluation is inherently backward-looking, especially bibliometrics, and we know that the Matthew effect, the more you have, the more you get, is rife in science. So we have to find a way, as difficult as it might be, of valuing potential and not just past performance, which may well just be a function of privilege. There are some great examples of this on the DORA website, especially for recruitment and funding. For example, asking candidates what their research plans and aspirations are, not just looking at their research history. As Adam Grant recently tweeted, the true measure of people's potential is not the height of the peak they've reached, but how far they've climbed to get there. And if we care about diversity, we have to get better at measuring this. And the final thing we need to prize is formative evaluation over summative. Ultimately, we have to ask, what is the point of research evaluation if it doesn't actually leave us with a better research system than the one we started with? And we all know from experience that whilst grades and scores, i.e. summative evaluation, might motivate us to improve and do better, what helps us learn is feedback, formative evaluation. As our Pro Vice-Chancellor for Research is fond of saying, you don't fatten a pig by weighing it, with apologies to all the vegetarians in the audience. We need to ensure that, as far as possible, our evaluations provide folk not just with a judgment on past performance, but with a clear idea about what they might do differently to improve the quality, visibility, and impact of their work. Telling somebody that 25% of their outputs appeared in the top 10% most cited in their field is summative. Showing someone a list of their outputs with a selection of indicators supplemented with a qualitative review of their publication activity is formative. And there needs to be a qualitative, formative element to our evaluations if they are to actually help people learn and grow. And of course, to achieve culture change on this scale, we need to use our influence because it's tough. Whenever I talk about research evaluation and the problems inherent within it, I often liken it to a food chain with every level interdependent on the others. So if we take as an example the highest profile research evaluation problem, namely evaluation by journal brand, resulting in journal brand obsession, which leads to price inflation and publication delays, there's obviously a lot of finger pointing at researchers at the bottom of the food chain here for refusing to give up these journal brands. But they claim to do so because universities recruit based on journal brands. But they only do so because funders and governments fund based on journal brands. And they only do so because rankings use the data sources based on these journal brands. And of course, the data providers sustain the whole food chain by indexing these journal brands. So of course, if you want to change the way that research evaluation is done, we need to not only change our own practices as bibliometricians, but also to influence up the food chain. So somebody posed this question to the List Bibliometrics list last year. They said, there's a desire at their institution to have a metric, and they're keen on just one, against which to evaluate the performance of our research. I'd be very interested to hear anyone else's experiences in dealing with the expectations of senior managers with this sort of thing. And I have to say that these sorts of queries are increasingly common. And I appreciate that despite my previous point, it's hard in the face of such requests from senior people to respond, oh, I'm sorry, I serve the researchers of the world, and I don't think this is in their best interests. So to help practitioners with this, another one of the outputs from the iNorms Research Evaluation Working Group was a short one-page guide containing 5 arguments that you could use to persuade your own higher education leaders to evaluate responsibly. The guide is on the iNorms web pages, and I've provided a link here. And obviously it will depend on your local setting as to which of these arguments you think might have traction. But in a nutshell, firstly, there is a moral argument for responsible research evaluation, as I've already mentioned, that it's fairer, and institutions that engage with poor practices put their staff well-being at risk, and with it expose themselves to reputational risk. However, ultimately, responsible research evaluation simply leads to better decision-making. Campbell's law tells us that we get what we measure. By measuring what matters, and with indicators that actually indicate those things that matter to them, institutions are simply more likely to make the best decisions that lead to the best outcomes. As somebody once put it, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And when you're potentially investing a lot of money in research staff, systems and activities, institutions also need to ensure that they're investing wisely in meaningful evaluations that are actually going to give them valid answers to their questions and not waste money on shortcuts that won't. There is also no doubt that there is an increased focus on responsible research evaluation as a result of sector agendas, including open research, improving research culture, and responsible research and innovation. Responsible research evaluation is now a requirement of Plan S and the Wellcome Trust's open access policy, and the Global Research Council is taking an interest in this area. They are holding an online event in November on this topic, so I'm fairly sure that further global funder expectations are going to follow. So institutions need to make sure they're operationally ready for these requirements. However, whilst there are external drivers, ultimately we believe that responsible research evaluation gives institutions an opportunity to maintain their institutional autonomy as mission and value-led organisations, enabling them to set and pursue their own goals and measure progress against their own goals and not others' goals, such as the university rankings. Now, obviously, institutions that have signed up to statements of responsible metrics have a much easier job here. So we're talking about DORA, the Declaration on Research Assessment, the Leiden Manifesto, or the Metric Tide, as practitioners can then just point to their own internal policy. But there's nothing to stop you from being steered by such frameworks, even if your organisation has not formally signed up to them. In my role, I regularly hear frustrated tales from folks whose institutions won't sign responsible metric statements. But I always say to them, it doesn't mean you can't operate in a responsible way. Folks in all walks of life work to professional best practice guidelines all the time. Become an individual signatory of DORA if your institution won't sign. Work to the Leiden Manifesto guidance. If your analytics are already in line with this guidance, it'll just make it so much easier for your institution to sign when the opportunity actually arises. Of course, the other domain in which we can use our influence is with the vendors of our products. You know, it's really hard to engender a healthy research evaluation environment in our institutions if the tools and the services that we use don't represent our communities equally, don't use indicators that are helpful to our communities, and don't honestly report on their own limitations. If you're part of a product user group or a community of practice, I'd really encourage you to use your voice there and call for the changes that you wish to see for your community's benefit. The List Bibliometrics group did this a couple of years ago. We published the findings of our survey, and I think we've seen some movement on the back of this. So Elsevier have just endorsed the Leiden Manifesto, whatever that might actually mean in practice. Clarivate brought out their profiles not metric statement. We've seen more error bars in some tools, which is great. I mean, there's a lot of room for improvement, but paying customers do have a right to be heard, I think. Now, I hope that no one is sitting there feeling uncomfortable about this, thinking, wow, Lizzie, it sounds like you're trying to raise up a band of militants, because I'm not, kind of, but I also am, kind of, because I think if the last 6 months has taught us anything, it's about the power of the active bystander, the person who calls a thing by its name and refuses to look the other way. If something's unhelpful, we need to call it unhelpful. If something's uncertain, you need to put error bars on it. If you find yourself running an analysis and the list of the caveats is longer than the analysis, you just have to walk away. And we're not good at this, and it's tough. And that's why we need our fifth and our final habit of the effective practitioner. and that is they make friends. In this fast-moving field where so much is at stake and there's so much we need to do better, we have to build a good network around us to be really effective. So we need to make friends. We need to make friends with fellow bibliometric practitioners, join discussion lists, contribute to discussion lists, and I've listed a couple here. Be a giver, share intelligence and journal articles, and do this internationally. We face global issues after all. And if you're not sure about discussion lists, why not set up your own community of practice locally? Find the others in your area that are doing the same job as you and build trust and share with them. We also need to make friends within our institutions. Staff your weaknesses. Get to know the IT folks, the research policy folks, the planners, the movers, the shakers. Know who you need to partner with to make a difference. And that counts outside our institutions. We need to make friends with policymakers, with product vendors, with data providers. And of course, most importantly, make friends with your faculty. If you want to evaluate with the evaluated, you need to know them. And you've never truly understood disciplinary nuances until you've become eyeball to eyeball with an economist who's married to the ABS list, a mathematician who solves an important problem with a paper that will never be cited because it was literally the final word on that topic, or a social scientist whose extremely well-cited book isn't indexed by Insights. Attend their inaugural lectures, attend their open day talks, hear their stories, feel their pain, and breathe their air. I said at the outset that we've inherited a bit of a damaged profession, and I think that's true. We've inherited tools and services and indicators and a culture that is far, far from optimal. And we're seeing new tools and services and indicators that are coming on stream all the time that are also far from optimal. We're seeing a rise in the use of artificial intelligence in research evaluation, which is really concerning considering the inherent biases in the citation network that's training it. We're seeing an increase in university and researcher rankings that are using composite black box metrics to make poor value judgments about our people and our institutions. We're seeing new indicators that are copies of old indicators that we already knew weren't working. But do you know what? I think this profession is in safe hands because it's largely fallen into the hands of librarians and other like-minded folk who have equity, transparency, and rigor in their DNA. And you know, we aren't going to change the world overnight. Of course we're not. But you might change the world for one person. You might make the world of research evaluation a little bit fairer and a little bit more transparent and a little bit easier to navigate for someone. And to my mind, that'll be time well spent. I often come back to this expression, it's better to light a candle than curse the darkness. And who knows, if enough of us light candles, we may get rid of the darkness altogether. And with that, I will finish. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you again for inviting me. And I'm more than happy to continue the conversation with you. Chris, back to you.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. That was fantastic. Thank you for everything and for what a great way to kick off our event. So thank you. Yelling, do we have questions?
Yes. Also, thank you, Lizzie. I wish there is a way that we can share the claps with you. But here is the first question. The question is focused on the training slide that you mentioned. You said that 29% of the from the survey people who have received training, and people are saying that it seems a little bit high, so they would like to know the sample population, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about that survey.
Yeah, well, it was a few years ago now, so you're testing my memory, but it was a survey that we ran on the Bibliometrics list. I didn't think it went any broader than that, and I think we had about 130 respondents, the majority of which I'm going to guess about 65% were librarians. So, yeah, it was 29% of those, 65% of 150, and if your math is better than mine, you can work that out. But that's interesting that the community thinks that's high. It may be that it was perhaps the UK bias. I'm not quite sure what our audience is made up of today, but that might have affected it.
And another related one is also about the training. Is it the training in library school? Because people are saying that they receive training in mathematics or statistics. So would that count in the survey?
This is asking specifically about their LIS degree, because we were hoping to influence the information school community to get bibliometrics kind of up the agenda or on the agenda in some cases, to ensure that people had a better understanding of what these metrics were and how they should and shouldn't be used. So it was specifically about library and information science type qualifications.
Would you be able to share with the survey results again? I know it's several years ago.
Yeah, definitely. Let me dig that out. I can put it in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And then there's a question about what you said, that the decision of a bibliometrics or research evaluation practitioner to walk away will lead not only to the project being redesigned or abandoned, but also to the project being carried out by someone who is not aware of the issues. Do you have any comment on this dynamic?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? I guess it comes down to your own kind of moral code and what you feel you can, where you're best placed, really. Are you best placed on the inside trying to influence, or are you best kind of making a stand and saying, sorry, that goes against my professional ethics and against all the codes of conduct and the manifestos that my profession works to? Only you can kind of make that decision, really. I think it's a personal one, but I can see both sides, and it really would depend on the particular circumstance that we were talking about. It's hard to answer in the abstract about that.
Okay, there's a follow-up question about the training. So people say that 29% indeed is a little bit high based on the experiences here in the United States and in Canada, especially library school. So people are interested or curious about the training in UK.
So what training that is offered in
Bibliometrics?
Well, I wouldn't be able to answer that question, I'm afraid, because we didn't ask the question in the survey. Just was it covered, yes or no? So I guess you'd need to look at the kind of curricula for those, perhaps from UK library schools. So there's one in Sheffield. I'm fairly confident that the Sheffield High School will cover bibliometrics, just to see what they're actually covering on their curriculum there.
Great. Anything else that's come in?
That's all from my end.
All right. Well, then we are nearing the bottom of the hour. So thank you once again, Lizzie, for kicking us off so well. Really do appreciate it. So we're going to now take a quick 15-minute break. We'll come back at about 1:15 Eastern Time, and we'll reconvene with a panel session on roles for librarians in research impact services. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie.